What's up everybody and welcome to another edition of AGR's Pop Culture Reviews, and what a way to start a weekend, guys. Now, my sister and I spent countless hours playing the original NES version of Castlevania, so when I found out that Netflix was doing an original series based on the Castlevania games, I was super excited. I was also excited for the fact that they were going to be more mature and rated R, and this is amazing, guys. I've been waiting for the series for a while. I just watched all 5 episodes, and even though it's not that long in terms of season 1, they are memorable episodes. Really freaking cool, guys. Now, this is both the Castlevania of my childhood, and at the same time, it's a Castlevania not of my childhood, and that's a good thing. And holy shit, guys, for those of you who have been wanting a rated R series of Castlevania, you guys got it. They do not mess around in this series. The imagery and the graphic violence is really strong, but at the same time, it's not gratuitous. It's not just there for shock value. It actually enhances the story. And this is going to sound a little bit funny, but it's done in a very tasteful way. In terms of the setting, I absolutely love it so far. It takes place in Wallachia in and around the 1400s. But what's even more interesting is that this is based on the 3rd installment in the original NES series, Castlevania III: Dracula's Curse. Now, that game was innovative in its own right, allowing players to have branching paths and to play multiple characters. That's one of the strongest things about this series. You do go back to the original Belmont, which is Trevor Belmont, sort of a prequel in the original NES titles. But Trevor Belmont is not alone, and one of the things that I absolutely loved about the original NES game is that we do get those additional characters, principally Sypha and Alucard, Dracula's son. Now, one of the things that I think is really strong about this series so far is the characterizations of basically everybody in this series. Dracula is kind of a tragic figure in all of this, especially in what they're doing with the story, which is in and of itself pretty interesting, but I don't want to spoil anything. You know, things are not so black and white here, and they didn't just make him a caricature. He's actually somebody that you can relate to and understand why the things are going on the way they are in this series. I also really like what they did with Trevor Belmont here. He's a really interesting character. How can I explain him? If Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop met Mugen from Samurai Champloo and had a baby together, which sounds really freaking weird, but that's essentially what they are. They're kind of a melange of those two characters, and needless to say, that is freaking awesome. He's kind of a reluctant hero, so to speak. Very honorable, but I mean, you have to understand that in this series, the Belmonts are not revered like they were in the video game, if they ever were. They've actually been banished by the church, and people don't like them so much, and that's another interesting part about this story and the overall tone of this series. Also, I have to say that this is not mindless violence. There's actually a message behind several of the things, the imagery, and even the story and the brilliant dialogue here. They're challenging the status quo, at least from the 1400s, and they're looking at the hypocrisy and the legacy of religion, the organized church, and how they really manipulated people into kind of controlling their everyday lives, which is freaking amazing for a Castlevania series, to be honest with you. One of the things that makes this series so clever is that anybody can take away the juxtaposition between the age of reason and science and kind of mob mentality and old school testament and the control that the church had among the populace. I love that there's an interesting and almost blurred line at times between the age of enlightenment and ignorance, and that's a very powerful message here. I also have to commend this series for being very conservative in terms of the overall action. Now, if you've been watching anime for a long time, you know how over the top and surreal it can be, oftentimes defying physics and whatnot, and I don't know, you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit. What they did here in terms of the action and the movement is really amazing. Instead of using those over-the-top techniques, they instead focused on slowing down the action. Now, that doesn't mean that it's boring. It just means that the action takes its time. You can actually see what's going on in the choreography. There's a kind of like crescendo to it that's very elegant, and it is so kick-ass, guys. You know, as I was watching the first 5 episodes, something kept coming back to me like if I had seen this style of animation before, because it is highly stylized in a good way. It's not used for the purposes of covering up bad drawings or bad animation. It's just the way that it's drawn. It's a little more lifelike and more organic. And it suddenly came to me that this reminds me a lot of Witch Hunter Robin, which is personally one of my favorite series for many of the reasons that I'm actually giving accolades to this series. It's just really freaking cool, and one of the things that I really loved about it is that just like this series, Witch Hunter Robin 2 took its time with the animations and especially the action sequences. I'd also be doing a disservice to the series if I didn't talk about the overall cinematography, the style, and art direction here. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, in a series like Castlevania, you'd expect to see a lot of dark tones, even monotone, but they didn't do that here. Actually, they were very diverse in terms of the overall color palette, and it's very appropriate here. Guys, what I'm trying to say is that this anime is absolutely stunning. Overall, guys, if I had one complaint about this season right now, it's that it's way too freaking short. But in those 5 episodes, they pack a lot of information. It's very memorable, especially the last episode. Episode 5 is just freaking awesome. So I encourage everybody to watch this. If you're a Castlevania fan, if you like vampires, or if you just like the 1400s for whatever reason, this is an interesting series. It's smart, it's clever, and I highly recommend it to everybody. It's on Netflix right now. Alright everybody, so that's my official review on the Netflix original series, Castlevania. As always, I thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next AGR's Pop Culture Reviews. By the way guys, Alucard is freaking awesome. That's all I'm gonna say.